Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today, sitting down to talk about that Todd Howard interview with the Kinda Funny Xcast boys. It was a good one. We got a lot of brand new details on Starfield that I'm excited to dive into today. Apologies for the delay. I had a little doctor's appointment today, so I know y'all expected this video earlier today, but thank you for your patience. I do truly appreciate it. What we're going to do is, as per usual with the Todd Howard interview, is we're going to let the clips speak for themselves, and then I'll give my thoughts afterwards. With that, if you're new here, you're into Starfield news, information, any type of coverage, you already know we're right on top of it as we always have been. Consider subscribing. And now let's begin with accessibility settings. This is something that the Direct didn't cover. We haven't seen in many interviews whatsoever with Todd. So what are some of the accessibility settings coming to Starfield? And with that, we learned a little bit about something that may please a lot of people if it ends up being true.
Well, first, I think Xbox has done an incredible job there with everything they've done with accessibility and their controller in particular. You asked, one thing that we're really leaning in on with this game is having a large font mode, which really is important in an RPG where there's a lot of stuff to read. So it comes into play with, obviously, for accessibility, but also various monitor sizes. I'm noticing that that's really helpful when I play. There's a lot more handheld devices coming out where you can stream these games or sometimes even play them natively, and it really helps us there as well. So that's one in particular that we're leaning in on.
That's sweet. That's sweet. And you talk about handheld. Can you share with us, is it Steam Deck compatible? Is that something you focused on, or is that something we share later down on the road?
We'll talk about that later down the road. Yeah.
So Todd said exactly what I would have put out there when it comes to role-playing games and some type of accessibility setting. 100%, you want that larger font. So nothing for me to add there. But when it comes to Steam Deck, y'all, Todd denies a lot of things being in this game throughout this interview, which I thought was great. Keep it transparent because we're still all really excited for the game. So shutting things down, like we'll get into fishing later. He's not afraid to close down the idea of things being possible in this interview. So the fact that he didn't deny that Steam Deck compatibility would be a thing for Starfield has me a little excited. He mentions handhelds throughout this interview a couple of times. Here's my prediction is this will be a game that I think they promote on the ROG Ally. Xbox already has built-in Game Pass with the ROG Ally. The specs for that thing are absolutely insane. I know the Steam Deck is the real darling, but this is the new kid on the block that's got some insane power behind it. Whatever you got to say about the battery life don't matter. I mean, that thing is impressive. To have Starfield on the go on your system without any sort of compromises, I feel like that's going to be the one that they link themselves to. The Steam Deck would, of course, be an obvious boon, but we'll see in due time. The fact that he didn't shut it down at all means that the verdict is still out on whether or not that's possible. What we want to know is, does Starfield have fishing, right? Well, Jez Corden asked this question, apparently, and we now have our answer.
So I put it to you, Todd. Fishing or no fishing?
Well, it depends on your definition of fishing. So is it collecting fish, killing fish, or is it specific to having
Is there some kind of rod that I can put into a lake and pull out an alien fish and then sell it or cook it or something?
That is one thing we do not have.
Okay.
I'm not that upset about this. Some people were. I don't know. I feel like a lot of AAA games have become very by the numbers in what the content offering is. You got to be able to pet a dog in every single AAA game now, and you got to be able to fish in every. It's like, have we lost, like, what about beyond that? So I'm not trying to be a prick about it, but I'm just saying that I kind of like that Starfield's doing a bunch of other things, and they're really not worried about fishing. Would it be cool if it's there? Yeah, but like Skyrim took over, what, a decade to get fishing added to the game, so like a modder will handle it. A modder will handle it. Don't y'all worry. We'll get it soon. Probably sooner rather than later, but I like that it's not a primary focus right now. With everything else it's doing, I don't care if fishing's there or not, really. We actually talked about this during our video on IGN's preview of Starfield. What gives with procedural generated content versus handcrafted content? I think we finally in this interview got the true clarification on that. Here is what Todd had to say.
You know, the million-dollar question as it comes to a game like this, it's a great question, one that we honestly struggled with early in the project. We wanted to do the planets because we like to give you that choice. Where do you want to go? You feel like you would want that choice in a game like this. And so first it was technically, could we pull it off? And you know, we did technically be able to, you know, draw these planets, make them feel believable on the screen. Now, obviously, it's procedural. Okay, so there's no way we're going to go and handcraft an entire planet. What we do is we handcraft individual locations, and some of those are placed specifically, obviously the main cities and other quest locations, and then we have a suite of them that are generated or placed when you land, depending on that planet. Now, I'll also say for us, we view it as giving you, when you look at a system, here's the menu of things you could do. And like science, and we're pushing it, about 10% of those planets have life on them. And we're pushing it to the edge of what do people think, what planets are in that Goldilocks zone versus planets that have resources.
Right.
You know, I think it is a moment when you land on some of these barren planets. And again, we will generate certain things for you to find on them. But if you look at a planet, you see the resources, it has things you want. There is, I love the Buzz Aldrin quote, the magnificent desolation. I think there's a certain beauty to landing on those and feeling I'm one of the only people or the only person to ever visit this planet. So it's a difficult design thing. If you add too many things, if it's generating too many abandoned bases or towers or things to find, it starts feeling too gamey in some of those locations. So I think we've dialed that in pretty well. Depending on the planet that you're on. And so we hope everybody enjoys it for what it is, but it is an exploration different than we've had.
All right, beautiful. Like a lot to take in there, but this was the answer I was looking for, and I get it now. I like that he has the mindset, and he'll say this again with some other side quest related questions, that we're going to kind of present it to you where you're going to know going in. I think that's great because when you have 1,000+ planets, I don't know how else to put it other than I want that stuff to maybe be avoidable at times when I'm looking for something that I would call more meaningful. And so to me, this is great news across the board. Like, okay, you have these planets. There's a suite of content that's generated for that planet when you arrive, and that's how it differs for some of them. Meanwhile, there's a lot of specific towns, cities, handcrafted quests, and so on and so forth that take precedent in this game. Not only that, but 10% of the game having life. I mean, simple math right there. 100 planets are going to have some sort of life on there, some sort of interactions we can have there. This is where I think the jury's still out on Starfield and its long-term enjoyment for some people, and where I think modders will play a big factor in that is that, let's say 100 planets, right? 100 planets got people and quests and towns. That means you got a 90% chance of finding a place that has nothing really for you except some of that generated content. So I'm keen to learn the exploration pacing because we've never had this before, right? With something like Fallout 4 even, you'd go from area to area to area, but it's all been handcrafted. It's just that sometimes the quests would be like, I need you to go defend this settlement, and I'll mark it on your map. You know how it all goes, right? Where that would be more of the procedural, endless nature of the game. But with Starfield now, like, it's the planets you're landing on. And so I'm just curious what the flow is going to be like, because it's very different than it's ever been for a BGS game in the past. I think it's exactly what Todd said at the end of the quote. It comes down to balance. If it's balanced well and we're not going to be finding it and the gameplay's fun enough and the loot is rewarding enough, then it shouldn't be a problem. But I think this is one of those things for many of us that we'll just have to get our hands on and see what it's all about. And Todd was asked this question after this about the size of planets, and while he never really, I feel, fully answered it, he did give us a really cool nugget in the middle of it. So here's what he had to say.
We have a lot of biomes. We do look at temperature, we look at the radiation, we look at all of those things on a planet so that your suit and your protection, you can get certain ailments if you're not ready, and certain weather things can come through. With all of that. So there are obviously planets that might have one type of biome, and there are planets that have a whole bunch, and their creatures and the plants and everything go with the biome. So there's a whole part of the game where surveying a planet, like discovering all of the flora and fauna and resources. Planets also have traits, usually geological things that are inherent to that planet, and uncovering those. And if you fully survey a planet, that data is actually worth a lot of money, credits in the game that you can sell. So there's a whole part of the game that's really just doing that. It's a little more, I almost describe it zen-like.
This is something we called out at the end of my in-depth analysis on the Starfield Direct as one of those hidden details where you would discover this geophysical trait of something as you're scanning the planet. And now we know that it's when you gather the 100% scan for a planet, it's data that you can sell. I'm very interested in this game's economy because it's something that Todd tapped into a couple of times here. He taps into it with the Outposts and how they can generate economy. More on that in a little bit. He taps into how the Outposts are later game stuff. The shipbuilding is later game stuff. It costs a lot of money, that you have to register ships because it costs money. I'm very invested in this game's economy where you're buying and selling and trading quite a bit, and what it all amounts to. Like, what are you earning a ton of money for? Is it just for new spaceship upgrades? Is there something beyond that? Same thing with Outposts. Is it just upgrades there? I'm very keen to learn more on this, but I like that it's an RPG focusing on making money. I know that sounds a little ridiculous, but for me, I feel a lot of RPGs just throw their item and currency economy just completely out the window as a major focus. To me, one of the biggest dud kind of feelings in an RPG is when I have millions of dollars or whatever the currency is called in the game, and I haven't spent it on anything throughout the game. One title that's kind of ran into that issue for me lately is Diablo 4. You know, I have over 1 million gold. I haven't spent any money because anything I loot is better than anything I could buy. So the money's just kind of there as a, ooh, I picked something up. Which maybe that's the whole point of it all. You can, of course, increase your stash space and whatnot, and that'll cost a couple $100,000. But it's where the light bulb in my head kind of flicked on. I went, this is like we need to find stuff in these role-playing games to spend money on actively. Next up here, we also talked about during the coverage of IGN's preview, mounts. Are there any? Here's Todd's answer.
Is there a land vehicle or an option to maybe mount some of these wildlife creatures to use as a land transportation mode of transport?
There is not. You know, we do design it. I think when we've seen this with our other games where we want to design it so it feels good on foot, but we do have the boost pack. You saw some of that in the video, and you have skills for the boost pack. So the boost pack almost acts like this vehicle. It's super fun where you can fly through, and then the low gravity planets are just really, really something special in the game.
I think this is kind of disappointing only because I think with the pacification of creatures, I found it to be one of the more useless perks that you could get in Fallout 4. Like, oh, hey, stop, or hey, run away. I don't know. I never actively used any of those. Maybe people will find use in it in a pacifist playthrough. Like, I don't want to kill anything. I'm going to make them all run away. Perhaps that's the idea there. But to me, the idea of pacifying an enemy and then being able to mount and ride them around these big open worlds or open zones, what have you, sounds really cool. And it feels like a missed opportunity there. Then again, with the horse riding and whatnot, like Skyrim, you know, it's not like it's been something that's always been great in a BGS game, but it's kind of been there. So I find it a little bit disappointing. Is it the end of the world? No. I do vastly prefer that they focus on foot exploration. I'm weird that way with vehicles in video games, so I'm okay with this at the end of the day, but a little bit disappointing for sure with all the cool creatures that are in Starfield, and obviously the ability to mount some of the most wild ones would be just awesome for the game in general. Now we've got companion details, and there's much to be said here, so let's listen in.
Traits that really make you, I want to play by myself, and then there's also skills that go into that give you special perks and bumps if you are solo. Them leaving on their own, they can, depending on the choices you make, they can get angry with you.
Yeah.
And then the relationship that you have with the companion can change based on the decisions you're making in the game.
If I get mad at my companions, Todd, can I space them and take them and make them walk the plank on my spaceship?
You can leave them behind. You can tell them where to go. You can assign them. You can assign them to outposts. You can assign them to ships that you're not using and things like that. The 4 main constellation ones are the ones that support full quest lines for them and romance.
Could my crew on my ship be all robots? Is there a possibility of having enough robot companions / crew members to be an all robot starship?
Technically, yes. There's Vasco, and then there's a few other things, but
Okay.
Not to
forward to
the
that.
extent of the humans, obviously.
So I didn't expect us to be able to, but it doesn't sound like you can, for example, kill your companions. That's fine. He never really says you can have them leave you, as in they don't get pissed and say like, all right, I'm out. I also think that's fine because as a writer, that's an extreme challenge to be like, okay, what if they're here? What does all of this suite of cutscenes look like? And with Bethesda's breadth and openness in their games, how you can tackle anything at any time. He actually talks in this interview about the chaotic nature of their quests and how you can just log all of these halfway through, and so much can happen between then and now that, you know, if you space Sarah, for example, how does it impact other things that she could have had a say in, right? So there is that there, which I totally understand and I'm fine with. I'm curious when they get angry with you, is it just a little slap on the wrist? What's the choice and consequence of Starfield when it comes to its story? I loved in BioWare games, just even the voicing of disapproval I found to be great. But if they run around and follow me and fight with me anyway, then, you know, I feel like it's just sort of flavor at that point. Again, I understand the writing challenge to it all, but I think there is a way for them to find a way to implement true consequence. So we'll see how that all goes. Todd also said that the 4 main members of Constellations are ones that you can romance and have their own quest lines. So we saw Sarah, we saw Sam, we know Vasco's there. We don't know if we can romance Vasco. That would be interesting. But it sounds like there's a couple others. I don't think they're the main 4 they showed when you enter the Constellation headquarters. That seems to me very anti-Bethesda Game Studios to be like, let's put all 4 of the companions in the same room. To me, it would make sense based on what we're seeing. Sarah is in New Atlantis. We have Inocula, Sam Rowe, and then probably someone in Neon and someone in another major city that maybe we haven't seen yet. Who knows? That would be my personal guess, and these are going to be your main companions that you get along the way. But otherwise, it seems like, you know, there may be a little bit of that automaton energy where you can have like a full robot brigade, which kind of cool. But let's talk a little bit more about space radio, because Todd does have an answer for that.
So is there any kind of space radio that we'll be able to listen to as we're exploring?
There is one, but it is pretty much local to a certain location. It's
Okay.
not something you can dial into when you're away, but there is a little bit of that, I would
Cool.
say.
I love in-game radio.
I know we like radios. We're all Fallout fans here for the most part. I think it's good that it's just keeping it to one location. I want Starfield to have its own identity. I don't want Starfield to be this sort of bleeding through of major things that define other Bethesda franchises as its core identity. I know I've said like, oh, it's kind of a melting pot where you see things from Skyrim, Oblivion, Fallout 4, that types of things, but it's like the mechanics, it's some features, but like I don't think settlement mode, for example, is a defining feature in just Fallout 4. I think that it's something that would be implemented in future games from Bethesda Game Studios, but something like the radio is very much synonymous with what a Fallout game in the modern age is. I like that they're kind of keeping it to just one specific location because it can also make that location very special. Ships, we have ships details, so here we go.
When you steal one, we do make you register it. If you want to modify it or use it in those ways, you have to spend credits to go register it. And that's for us to keep it from the economy kind of spiraling in those ways. You can fly it around, but if you want to mess with it, you register it, and then you go through that whole loop of upgrading it. I will say that that's a very deep system, and one that we expect for late game. It's not like you start the game and then you're going to get right into shipbuilding. It costs a lot of credits. It is, in a good way, a very complicated system, and one that it was more of a longer term thing in the game. You can easily upgrade your ship, like just go in and say, I want to improve these weapons, I want to improve the grav drive or the shields. That's very, very easy to do. But where you go in that mode and you break it apart and you're building, that is a whole mode onto itself that is more of a long-term play kind of thing.
If I'm going to New Atlantis and they scan my ship and I do have contraband, what happens?
You'll have to wait and see.
Very tight-lipped on the contraband aspect of it all, so very keen to learn what does happen if you bring some illegal goods into, say, New Atlantis, how they approach you and everything. But when it comes to the ships in this game, I love that you have to register them to modify it. I imagine this is what Todd meant. about the economy of the game, where you can steal these ships and you can fly them around, but if you want to really modify them all and you want to change parts of them out, make them better, enhance them, what have you, you're going to have to register them as well. So that is pretty cool to me personally, because we did see in the Starfield Direct how there's almost like this garage that you could sweep them all through. So I imagine that's the registry right there. I figured a lot of you would be like me and enjoy what Todd had to say about the focus for Starfield side quests. So here we go. Are they randomly generated, or are we getting more focused content? Listen to what Todd had to say.
Well, look, it comes down to making all of that content, and our folks have done an incredible job there, and there really is a lot of it. So we have a lot of specific quests, but it's not what you're talking about, the sort of random one-off ones. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. We obviously have a bunch of that.
Right.
You can land on a planet and go to an outpost, and we're going to generate a mission nearby, and you're going to see some of that. But I think that's okay if you know you're in for it. And those activities, if the gameplay is good, can be fun, but they shouldn't take the place of those more in-depth ones. And we've done a lot of those.
No complaints here. None at all. Those should always be the star of the show. Those dense, character-driven ones should always be the focus. I think a lot of people have accused Todd of being more quantity than quality focused, and I'm hoping that the side quests really prove those types of people wrong, because that to me is what makes a Bethesda Game Studios game great. It's not, I mean, you can like the main story. I love the main story in Fallout 3, for example. I enjoyed it in Fallout 4 quite a bit, but as I mentioned in the IGN preview video, like, I played and beat Skyrim once. Like, I don't fire these games up to get into the main story. And I'm like a main story completionist type of dude. Like, to me, that's the bare minimum. But with the BGS game, it's like the highlight reel of the factions, the people I interact with, the choices, that type of stuff is what matters. So to me, as long as they nail these side quests, this will be a special game, and I like where his head's at. I actually made this prediction in an older video, and it looks like we were right. Here's what Todd had to say a bit about Outposts in Starfield.
There is a ton there, and you can even actually somewhat connect them between planets, shuttling cargo between them. So it's a really, really cool system. But, you know, I will say, again, like shipbuilding, one that has a lot of depth. It's not really meant as like an early player kind of system. It's meant to be one that you're going to play over a long period of time.
Well, that brings me on to just a quick follow-up on that. So potentially, can Outposts be an economy generator for you as well?
Yes, they can.
Just a little pat on the back here. Seems like the trade routes from Fallout 4 settlement mode are making their way here to the outposts in Starfield, where you can link them together with little shuttles, which I thought was actually really cool. And this seems to be a place you can make a lot of money again. It says you can generate cash here. So I hope that, I'm crossing my fingers. I've asked for this feature in Fallout 4, that if you build up your outposts enough that you can attract people of importance to said outposts, and they'll give you unique quest lines. Like, to me, that's the perfect way to cap off the use of a outpost in a Bethesda Game Studios game. If someone comes along and maybe they have like a unique weapon, unique piece of armor that they can give you in a quest, or maybe they can just sell it there because they see that your outpost is extremely profitable, something along those lines. Like that speaks to the soul right there. So I hope they finally take this age-old, I think I was like 18 when I thought of it, Mr. Matty idea, and make it a reality. Afterwards, it was a shotgun blast of final questions. So here they all are, and then we'll discuss some of the answers.
2 quick yes or no ones for you. Are there black holes in this game? And my dear friend Emily, she would kill me if I did not ask this, can Vasco wear a hat like Mr. Handy did in Fallout 4?
I'm going to pass on the first question. Can Vasco wear a hat? Not currently, but I'm sure that will be an early mod.
Have you ever wanted to do a smaller project? You and the team, Todd, have created these massive, incredible games. Have you ever thought about making a small game?
Like a little Pentiment kind of thing on the
small.
side? Yeah.
Well, we have the mobile team. We did Fallout Shelter, which I think is our most played game ever at this point. So we do some of that. We have some mobile stuff going too that looks really cool that we haven't talked about. So we get to dabble in that. But at the end of the day, you know, I as a player, I like the big worlds that I can get lost in. That's why, you know, many of us here wanted to make games.
Not much for me in the terms of Vasco wearing a hat or black holes. Todd kind of ignoring that is telling in some way. I wonder why. Maybe it's a main story thing, like when you're warping to a main story point, you get like sucked in a black hole, something crazy happens. Who knows? I don't know. Anybody's guess. But what I thought was really interesting was he is not into the idea of a smaller game, really. I mean, he used the mobile games as an example, but then like a quick flex, he's like, yeah, we got these smaller games like Fallout Shelter. Happens to be our biggest game ever, by the way. I love this answer for one specific reason, and I get game development's tough. I'm living through it right now. It's difficult, no doubt. But I appreciate Todd's enthusiasm, it sounds like, for the big, broad projects, the big AAA Titanic projects. I feel like all I read about now is crunch, poor development conditions, how awful AAA is, and I'm not saying none of those are true. But after you hear a lot of bad, negative, you wonder if there's anything good about it. Does everyone feel this way? And to see a guy at the top who's directing these mammoth-like projects, and this one being a passion project of his, it's really awesome to see him just like, no, I wouldn't want to make a Pentiment-style game. It kind of breaks my heart a little bit because I would really be interested in seeing Todd tackle something like they mentioned, such as Pentiment. It doesn't have to be that exact style game, but in the terms of scale and scope, it'd be really interesting to see what he does with that. I always wondered if Todd left Bethesda Game Studios, would he be one of those developers that starts an indie company up and starts firing away over there on these cool, unique ideas. But I think because he has so much control and power over what he does at Bethesda Game Studios, he calls a ton of the shots there. You know, like, why does he need to go leave and be on his own? He kind of has the keys to the castle now. So I get why he doesn't have much of a desire to do smaller games, because he kind of calls his own shots here and now. And I think he has it pretty good, it sounds like. That's at least my interpretation of the quote. I am assuming a little bit here. But overall, that's everything Todd had to say from top to bottom that was, I thought, of note when it came to Starfield. There were little things here or there that had nothing to do with the game, but, you know, of course, it's still worth a listening. It's a great interview, and congrats to the Kinda Funny boys on getting God Howard in the building. May the Dukes be blessed like that one day. We shall see. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, let me know your thoughts on everything with the Todd Howard interview in the comments down below. Other than that, be sure to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Those links are in the description down below. And a big thank you to all the patrons, all the members who continue to support the hell out of the content here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.